Hello and welcome to the Inside Stylists podcast. I'm Emma Morton-Turner and you're listening to episode 33, 10 Things I've Learned Interviewing Interior Stylists for Inside Stylists podcast. So since I've been recording episodes with interior stylists on this podcast, there have been a lot of similar topics coming up. And some during the podcast and some afterwards when we're just having a chat or our little pre-chat. And I was really surprised by what came out of those conversations with people who I've known for absolutely years. So I thought it might be good to share them with you and see if you're surprised too. So it's going to be a short episode and I hope you enjoy it. Number 1, they got their first job with a lot of hard graft and then it was all about who they knew. So starting off at the very beginning, when it comes to landing your first job in a magazine, you need to know a number of things. And the things that have cropped up are how magazines work. You need to know where to be, what to do, when to put ideas forward, and more importantly, when to keep quiet. And you need to have a really big contact list of PRs because the more PRs you know, the more photographers, the more photographers' assistants, the more clients, the more in-house marketing people, the easier it is to get work once you go freelance. You need to know how to pack up a shoot. Because yes, this is a learned thing. It's ridiculous, but it's not so much that there are right and wrong ways. It's more that there are ways that make your life so much easier. For example, I know when I started styling or assisting, I used to wrap everything in bubble wrap and then tape it down so that it was secure. And actually you don't need to do that. You just wrap it tight and put it in a box and then put the next thing in and wedge it in so it doesn't move. And that is just one of those things. And that might just be how I like things to go, but I think most assistants will be shown how to pack a box so the stylist can get stuff out nice and quickly. You need to know how to keep a shoot running on time and be the most helpful to the stylist and the crew. And by that, I mean, you just need to be taking down stuff when the shot is finished. You don't need to be told, can you go and clear that? You might need to double check it's done, but by doing that, you are really keeping the shoot running smoothly. And that's why assistants are invaluable. You just can't do it without them. You do a great job, guys. You need to know a lot of people in the industry. I kind of mentioned that already. The more people you know, the more likely it is that your name will crop up when people are looking for a stylist or an assistant or a photographer or whatever. And you need to be okay with making the tea. I mean, I'm okay making the tea. I just don't tend to drink much tea. So it's part of the job. You know, it's like that whole going and getting the dry cleaning for the editor. It's that thing. You've got to be happy to do that. So the reason that this is all so important is because the interiors world is very insular. It's very friendly, but even rival magazines are friendly with each other. I think fashion isn't quite as friendly as interiors. So for example, when I was on Woman and Home, my closest magazine rival was Good Housekeeping, and Annalisa D'eath and I became friends then, and we're still friends now because you just get on. So it's really important to make friends with all the people in the industry. And it does take a bit longer now to move from work experience and being an assistant to getting onto a magazine, mainly because of the way magazines work. I think I've mentioned a few times recently that the very first magazine I worked on, the Homes department had 5 people, and 5 people now is a hub that works on 4 magazines. So there's a quarter of the amount of people working on magazines, which means those entry-level jobs just aren't out there. And to go from assisting to styling does take quite a bit longer because you're not meeting so many people. So it's just a much slower thing. But the thing that came through with talking to the stylists is that everyone was propelled forward by being recommended by someone they'd met. I mean, I got my very first job on Homes and Ideas because Dilly Orme knew the editor and said, go speak to my friend Paula. So I did. It's very much about knowing as many people as you can and being friendly. The old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know, is just spot on for styling. Sorry, this has turned into a bit of a lecture. I didn't mean it to be like that. Anyway, let's get on to number 2. That was just number 1. Number 2, another trait that came through from interviewing these stylists was that everyone has a side hustle. And I've always thought that people have a side hustle. I think it's because we're in a creative industry and we have this need to create an outlet for our creativity. And styling is our work. We need to be doing other things. And whether that's kind of just doing DIY at home and doing more interiors at home, or you might be a painter, you might throw some pots, you might be a florist. Floristry came up quite a bit actually. And so did wedding styling. People really like the idea of doing wedding styling. It's that whole flower thing. And then blogs, of course. Blogs is a big part of a side hustle. Crafting workshops and people writing books and all those sort of things that are spin-offs from being a stylist. So that side hustle thing is like really full on. Lots of people have other outlets. My side hustle, well, it's this website, this podcast, this blog, but for a very long time it was my cake blog, which actually is slightly neglected right now. But at the time, making cakes was going to be my plan B, and it was another way to be creative. So I bet you guys have got side hustles too. I bet there's something I haven't thought of. Tell me, write in the comments for the show notes what your side hustle is, because I'd really love to know. Number 3. Once you go freelance, you become an entrepreneur. So this was something that I wasn't really expecting. You think you're just going to carry on doing styling as you have on a magazine, but actually, when you're freelance, you have to promote yourself, you have to promote your styling and your writing as if you are a small business. So you need to think yourself as a brand, and you have to be very inventive so people can find you and know what you do. And it's no longer just a case of having a website and waiting for someone to come and commission you. You have to really push yourself to get out there, have catch-up meetings with PRs and get in front of people to make sure you're front of mind. And these interior stylists are really good at this. They put themselves forward. They're always out. I mean, if you watch people's Insta stories, you'll always see them off for breakfast meetings with PRs you've never even heard of. They're really on it. And the ones that do that are the ones that get booked. I've been watching it and it's actually fascinating. Any PRs out there want to go for breakfast? Just give me a call. Number 4, they're really driven. I mean, stylists are really driven. I know I'm quite driven and I'm very goal orientated. I need to have like a task to work towards. And I think of that as my business side of things. I mean, I've always had a business idea of the month. I mean, if you ask Charlotte Boyd, it was quite funny back in the day when I would go, oh, I've had this brilliant idea. I'd always have those ideas and things to work towards. But I just thought, that was just kind of something that I did. I thought stylists are just really creative and have these amazing talents of styling a decorating shoot or creating these really abstract art pieces. But actually, in reality, all stylists have this kind of real driven push to succeed. And I think without it, you'd struggle being freelance if you didn't have that push, that driven to be in a specific magazine or to work with a specific photographer. But that, I think, of all of the traits, of all of the surprises that came up, I think that one was the biggest surprise, is how driven stylists are. I think a little bit of that might be because they look really good. They're very pretty. They take a lot of care in how they look. Their houses are gorgeous. But beneath it, it's like, I am going to win. I'm going to succeed. I'm going to be the best I can be. And you don't really see that side of people. And it's not that it's hidden. It's just that it just surprised me. We're all the same. Deep down, we're all the same. Number 5, they come from all walks of life. Hardly anyone that I've interviewed who's a stylist, an interior stylist, has studied interior styling or design. Some have studied media and journalism, but pretty much everyone who got their stylist job was through on-the-job training. Some have come from graphic design backgrounds, some fashion. There's quite a few textiles. There's also illustrators, engineers. That's me. I did product design. I think I've mentioned that before. It's kind of engineering. Well, it had engineering, mathematical engineering in it, so I'm counting it as engineering. Anyway, so anything goes. You can come from literally any background whatsoever. Some people aren't even in creative jobs. They just have that need to be on a shoot. They need to get in styling. And that's always quite interesting that right now my daughter's doing her GCSEs and she's not really sure what she wants to do. She just knows she wants to do something creative. And I've told her it doesn't matter what you do. I really believe in fate and that you end up where you're supposed to be, and you do something because it means you meet someone. Or like I did engineering at college. That's how I met my husband. So I never regret doing the many years of engineering that I did before I did my product design, because that was how I met him. And also it got me my first job because I was very practical and could wield a saw. But that whole thing of not really knowing where you're going doesn't stop you getting to that creative job. It's just, you've got to just go with it. So if you're listening to this and you want to be in interiors and do shoots and you're doing something completely different, it doesn't mean that you won't get in. You will get in. You just got to keep at it. Number 6, they do more than just style for magazines. So back when IPC had a waft of people being made redundant and the interiors freelancers becoming available seemed to double overnight, maybe even triple overnight, there was a real wave of panic in the industry with new freelancers of how they were going to get their work, because it just felt like there wasn't going to be enough out there. In my opinion, you can get very institutionalized when you work on a magazine, especially when you've done it for many years. I was at IPC for about 11 years, and when I left, I felt like I was on holiday from Woman and Home for about 2 years. I always felt like I was kind of taking the summer off and I was going to do some other shoots and then I'll go back. I always just felt like I belonged, and it's quite hard to get past that. It's a really weird thing. But it felt like there were more freelancers and stylists out there than there were pages in the magazine when all these guys kind of went freelance. And the thing is, now with my experience of being freelance for nearly 8 years, there's so much more out there than just working on magazines. And this is something that stylists have turned around. And what I found interviewing these guys was that there are so many options that you can take into your own hands to a certain extent, with things like we were talking about workshops earlier and styling courses, that sort of thing. So there's all sorts of other stuff. But I mean, if I just say, for example, what I've done since I went freelance that isn't magazine work, I've done commercial lookbooks, catalogues, social media videos. There's so much going on for social media now. I've done TV ads behind and in front of the camera. I've styled events for press launches. I've done in-house business meetings. There's so much more to styling. And also there's also writing. Of course, you can write for people's blogs. You can write people's lookbooks. You can do all sorts of things. So it was quite interesting how many stylists who were in magazines, that wasn't 100% of their income. It was a fraction of their income. There's so much more out there. Number 7, they're fit and able. It's quite interesting how, this is just an observation of mine, obviously not something that they said, and also not something I was surprised by, because you have to be fit and able to be able to carry 3 boxes into a location from a van, backwards and forwards. You have to be willing to lay carpet. You have to lug sofas up 2 flights of stairs. And when I say they're fit and able, what I really mean is that they're not lazy. You'll never see a stylist sitting around on a shoot twiddling her thumbs. It is go, go, go the whole time. I mean, even lunch, you might just sit very briefly to have lunch, and then you'll probably be this is my experience anyway. I'm the first to go, right, should we get back to it then? While everyone's sitting having a chat, because you're very aware of the time constraints and getting cracking. So styling is like this full-on marathon, and only the fittest will survive. It's like a one-day shoot. You're thinking on your toes all day. You've probably driven quite a long way to get there, and the stress of traffic and parking and everything. And that's full on enough. But then when you've got a 5-day shoot as well, it's actually quite exhausting. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels like this, am I? Anyone? I'm sure I'm not. Anyway, stylists are fit and very able. Number 8, they will do anything to get a shot. So whether it's squeezing a photographer into the tiniest space, or covering a garden in fake snow on the hottest day of the year, or maybe even filling a bathtub with bubbles for a bathroom shot and then having to get in the shot to be shot from behind, stylists will do what it takes to get the right shot. And it's that they have that vision. You have to have the vision before you even start. And not only that, you have to be able to relay it. And that was something that was very common, in that people knew they could visualize exactly what they wanted to get out of a shot or out of a lookbook or whatever they were working on. I had very strong visuals. Number 9, they can fix pretty much any problem they come across. This has actually come up with quite a lot of people. It came up with set designers. It's come up with fabric and wallpaper designers. That in your life, like I was saying earlier, that when you're freelance, you're a small business. In business, you have issues. There are problems. There's always going to be things falling apart. There's always going to be a sofa on a shoot that doesn't turn up, or it's green and it should have been pink. And stylists have this innate way of fixing anything. So if it's getting hold of the right sofa from a shop on the day of the shoot, or attaching a curtain pole somehow to a location that you're not allowed to drill holes in the walls using photographers' clamps and stands and things, just stylists can fix all sorts of problems. It's quite interesting. I love it. Number 10. They find moving home or planning a wedding a doddle and don't get it when others find it hard. So there's loads of boxes and it's going to take a lot of effort. And stylists move house practically every week, every shoot. It's like moving house. It's just not a problem. And when I think of the few times that I've moved house, it's been stress-free because I'm so used to packing and unpacking boxes that I think I could probably set up my own removal company. In fact, we could set up our own removal companies. If we got together, we would be like a force to be reckoned with. And it's the same with weddings. It's all about logistics of location. You've got to get the flowers and making sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time. So basically, a shoot is like a wedding without a bride and groom or a party at the end, unless you go to the pub at the end of the shoot. I'd say logistics are probably more than half the workload when it comes to setting up a shoot, and where you need to be aware of where you need to get the props from, arranging collections, making sure the couriers and assistants and deliveries all know where they need to be and when. It's just one big juggling act. And the stylists I've spoken to are obviously very good at this. So we can move house and get married easily. And do you know what? I think the wedding part of it is, it's harder for us to do weddings because we know what's out there and it's making a choice of one type of flower or one kind of flower arrangement rather than the 6 different other options that we also really like. I think that's probably the hardest part. Anyway, like I said, it's going to be a very short episode. It's kind of gone from a little bit of what I've found from stylists and a little bit of what they've taught me and what I know that assistants might want to know. So it's a bit of a kind of a blurred line. Anyway, I hope you found it interesting. I don't think there's going to be very many show notes in this one. I'll just link through to the Inside Stylists and I'll tell you what I'll do. I will link through to some of the stylists who I've interviewed so you can hear their take on it and see if you can hear these traits coming through, because some of it was mentioned in the podcast, but like I say, some of it was mentioned afterwards. So yeah, and if you've got any other things that you think are interesting that crop up with stylists all the time, I bet assistants could come up with 1,000,001. Then let me know. Drop me a line or comment in the show notes. There's comments underneath the podcast episode show notes over on insidestylist.com. You'll find the show notes for this one on insidestylist.com/things I've learnt. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm going to be doing a couple of these solo episodes, probably one a month or so. So if there's anything you would like me to cover specifically, if there's anything you would like me to talk about, then just let me know. That would be great. As I mentioned, I've got Gareth Johnson on the podcast next week talking about set design and set building and disasters, knocking himself out, all sorts of things. So make sure you tune in next week for that one. So until then, bye for now.